What if the problem isn't that men don't want a good woman? What if the real problem is that many men no longer recognize what a good woman actually brings into their lives? In a world where attention is everywhere, where relationships are often judged by appearances, status, money, and temporary excitement, something important has been forgotten. Peace has value. Loyalty has value. Character has value. A woman who respects herself, respects her partner, and brings stability into a man's life is not boring. She is rare. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Not every man is ready for something rare. Some men say they want a good woman, but when they meet one, they become uncomfortable. Why? Because a good woman often demands something that superficial relationships never demand: growth. She may not entertain your ego. She may not chase you when you withdraw. She may not tolerate disrespect simply because she loves you. She may expect honesty, consistency, emotional maturity, and responsibility. And that can be difficult for a man who is still running from himself. Sometimes a man chooses chaos because chaos feels familiar. He mistakes emotional instability for passion. He mistakes constant attention for love. He mistakes physical attraction for compatibility. And when someone peaceful enters his life, he may call her too serious, too demanding, or not exciting enough. But perhaps she isn't the problem. Perhaps his mind has simply become addicted to things that cannot give him lasting peace. This is where a Stoic mindset changes the way you see relationships. Instead of asking, "Why doesn't he appreciate me?" or "Why doesn't she understand me?" you begin asking a deeper question: what kind of person am I becoming through the relationships I choose? Because your choices reveal your character. A mature man eventually understands that beauty can attract attention, but character creates trust. Chemistry can create excitement, but compatibility creates stability. And attraction may bring two people together, but discipline, respect, and self-control determine whether they can stay together. So today, we are going to explore 7 deeper reasons why some men don't want a good woman. Not to attack men, not to blame women, and not to create another gender war, but to understand human behavior. Because sometimes the person you reject today is exactly the kind of person you will spend years searching for tomorrow. And sometimes the greatest relationship lesson is realizing that you cannot build peace with someone who is still addicted to chaos. Let's begin. Reason 1: he has become addicted to chaos without realizing it. One of the deepest reasons some men reject a good woman is because they have become addicted to chaos without realizing it. They believe they are searching for passion, excitement, chemistry, and a relationship that makes them feel alive. But sometimes what they are actually searching for is emotional instability. When a person becomes accustomed to uncertainty, constant attention, arguments, jealousy, emotional highs and lows, and the endless need to prove their worth, peace can feel strange. Stability can feel empty. A healthy relationship can feel boring simply because the mind has been trained to expect drama. Think about someone who has spent years living in noise. When he finally enters a quiet room, he may not appreciate the silence. He may feel uncomfortable. He may even create noise because silence forces him to hear his own thoughts. Relationships can work the same way. A man who has become comfortable with emotional chaos may meet a woman who communicates clearly, respects herself, remains loyal, and refuses unnecessary drama. Instead of recognizing her peace as something valuable, he may interpret it as a lack of excitement. This is where emotional maturity becomes important. A good woman does not necessarily create constant emotional stimulation. She may not play games. She may not disappear to make you chase her. She may not create jealousy to test your feelings. She may not make you wonder every night where you stand. And because she refuses to participate in those games, an immature man may conclude that there is no chemistry. But chemistry should not be confused with anxiety. There is a difference between butterflies and uncertainty. There is a difference between passion and emotional instability. There is a difference between someone making your heart race because you feel deeply connected, and someone making your heart race because you don't know whether they will stay. A Stoic mindset teaches you to look beyond the immediate feeling. Not everything that feels intense is valuable, and not everything that feels peaceful is meaningless. Sometimes the things that are best for you do not produce the strongest emotional reaction in the beginning. They produce something much more important: stability. A man who constantly needs excitement may eventually destroy the very thing he claims to want. He may chase women who give him attention but cannot give him peace. He may become fascinated by someone who keeps him uncertain while overlooking the person who consistently stands beside him. He may think, "I don't feel the same spark," when what he really means is, "This relationship doesn't trigger the emotional chaos I am used to." And that realization can be uncomfortable, because eventually a person has to ask himself, do I want someone who makes me feel constantly stimulated, or someone with whom I can build a meaningful life? A good woman may not always challenge your emotions, but she can challenge your character. She may bring calm where there was confusion, honesty where there were games, and consistency where there was uncertainty. But you must be mature enough to recognize the difference. The strongest relationships are not necessarily the loudest ones. Sometimes real love is quiet. It looks like trust. It looks like keeping your word. It looks like two people solving problems instead of creating them. It looks like being able to sit together without needing constant entertainment. It looks like knowing that you don't have to manipulate each other to keep each other's attention. When a man learns to value peace, he stops asking, "Why doesn't this relationship feel like a roller coaster?" and starts asking, "Why would I want my heart to live on a roller coaster in the first place?" That is the shift from emotional addiction to emotional wisdom. Reason 2, she becomes a mirror he isn't ready to face. A good woman can become uncomfortable for a man who has not yet developed the maturity to face himself. Not because she is perfect, demanding, or impossible to please, but because her standards can reveal parts of him that he would rather ignore. When someone has become accustomed to excuses, inconsistency, emotional avoidance, or careless behavior, meeting a woman who values honesty, respect, and accountability can feel like looking into a mirror. And most people do not fear the mirror itself. They fear what it shows them. A woman with self-respect does not necessarily demand perfection. What she often demands is consistency. If you say you will do something, do it. If you make a mistake, acknowledge it. If you hurt someone, take responsibility. If you want a relationship, act like someone who is capable of maintaining one. These expectations sound simple, but they require discipline. They require a person to stop blaming circumstances and start taking ownership of their choices. This is where some men begin to pull away. They may have expected love to make life easier, but instead they discover that a healthy relationship requires them to become better. A good woman may support your ambitions, but she cannot build your discipline for you. She may encourage you, but she cannot carry your responsibilities forever. She may forgive your mistakes, but she cannot repeatedly protect you from the consequences of your own decisions. And when she establishes boundaries, an immature man may interpret those boundaries as rejection. But a boundary is not an attack. A boundary is information. It tells you what a person will and will not accept. A woman who says, "I will not stay where I am constantly disrespected," is not necessarily trying to control a man. She may simply be protecting her dignity. A mature man understands that. An immature man may become angry because her standards prevent him from behaving however he wants. This is why a good woman can expose immaturity without saying a single cruel word. Her consistency can expose inconsistency. Her discipline can expose laziness. Her honesty can expose dishonesty. Her emotional stability can expose emotional instability. Her ability to communicate can reveal someone else's inability to communicate. And sometimes, instead of improving, a person chooses to leave. It is easier to say she is too demanding than to admit, "I'm not ready to give what this relationship requires." It is easier to say she changed than to admit she stopped accepting behavior that I had become comfortable with. It is easier to criticize someone's standards than to develop the character necessary to meet them. A Stoic mindset asks you to do something different. Instead of becoming defensive when someone exposes your weaknesses, become curious about them. Ask yourself, what is this situation teaching me about myself? If a woman expects honesty, can you be honest? If she expects respect, can you control your anger? If she expects consistency, can you keep your promises? If she expects emotional maturity, can you communicate without disappearing, manipulating, or attacking? These questions are not about proving that one gender is better than the other. They are about character. The right relationship does not require you to become someone you are not, but it may require you to become a better version of who you already are. And that transformation can feel uncomfortable. Sometimes the person who challenges you is not trying to make your life difficult. They are showing you where you still have work to do. The question is whether you will run from that reflection or have the courage to grow. Reason 3. He wants admiration without accountability. Some men say they want a good woman, but what they really want is someone who constantly makes them feel important. They want admiration without accountability, attention without responsibility, and affection without having to develop the emotional maturity required to maintain a healthy relationship. There is nothing wrong with wanting appreciation from your partner. Every human being wants to feel valued. The problem begins when validation becomes the foundation of the relationship. A healthy relationship is not built around one person constantly proving the other person's worth. It is built around two people who already understand that their value does not depend entirely on someone else's approval. A good woman can encourage a man, support his goals, appreciate his achievements, and stand beside him during difficult times. But she should not have to spend every day repairing his insecurity. Some men become uncomfortable when a woman stops feeding their ego. They may expect her to chase them whenever they become distant. They may expect her to accept disrespect because she loves them. They may believe that if she truly cares, she will tolerate everything. But genuine love does not mean unlimited tolerance. A woman with self-respect can love a man deeply while still saying, "This behavior is not acceptable to me." She can admire his strengths while pointing out his weaknesses. She can support his dreams while refusing to participate in destructive behavior. She can be loyal without becoming dependent. And that is where some relationships become difficult. If a man is primarily looking for validation, he may prefer someone who constantly agrees with him. He may enjoy being praised more than being understood. He may want someone who makes him feel powerful rather than someone who encourages him to become responsible. But eventually, constant validation loses its effect. Compliments become ordinary. Attention becomes expected. And the relationship becomes less about love and more about maintaining someone's ego. A mature man understands that a partner is not an audience. Your relationship should not be a stage where one person performs and the other person applauds. It should be a place where both people can be honest. Sometimes your partner should tell you what you want to hear, but sometimes they should tell you what you need to hear. That distinction is extremely important. If a woman tells you that your behavior is hurting the relationship, the mature response is not immediately to become defensive. The mature response is to pause and ask, "Is there something here that I need to understand?" You do not have to agree with every criticism, but you should be strong enough to listen without allowing your ego to control the conversation. This is where self-mastery becomes more powerful than validation. A man who depends on constant approval becomes emotionally controlled by other people's reactions. When people praise him, he feels powerful. When they criticize him, he collapses or becomes aggressive. His emotional state is always in someone else's hands. But a disciplined man develops an internal foundation. He knows his strengths. He recognizes his weaknesses. He does not need everyone to admire him because he is focused on becoming someone he can respect when nobody is watching. That is why a good woman may not always make a man feel comfortable. She may challenge his assumptions. She may question his decisions. She may expect him to communicate instead of disappearing. She may refuse to reward bad behavior with attention. And instead of seeing that as rejection, a mature man can see it as an opportunity, because the purpose of a meaningful relationship is not to protect your ego from every uncomfortable truth. It is to create an environment where two people can become wiser, stronger, and more emotionally grounded together. When a man stops searching for someone who simply validates him and starts searching for someone who genuinely respects him, challenges him, and grows alongside him, his understanding of love changes completely. He no longer asks, "Does she make me feel important?" He begins asking, "Does this relationship make both of us better?" And that is a much deeper question. Reason 4. He mistakes intensity for meaning. Sometimes the greatest mistake a person can make is judging value by what creates the strongest feeling in the moment. A man may recognize beauty immediately. He may notice attraction, confidence, charm, or excitement within seconds. But character is different. Character reveals itself slowly. Loyalty is discovered through difficult moments. Emotional stability is understood over time. Genuine respect becomes visible through actions rather than words. And because these qualities are not always loud, some men fail to recognize their value until much later. A man who has not developed emotional wisdom may focus heavily on what gives him immediate satisfaction. He may choose excitement over stability, attention over loyalty, and chemistry over compatibility. He may believe that the relationship that produces the strongest emotions must be the most meaningful. But emotions are not always accurate guides. Something can feel exciting and still be destructive. Something can feel peaceful and still be incredibly valuable. A good woman may not constantly demand attention. She may not create jealousy to prove that she is desirable. She may not play games to keep a man interested. She may simply live with dignity, communicate honestly, and expect the same in return. To someone accustomed to chasing, this can appear ordinary. But ordinary is not the same as worthless. Sometimes we only understand the value of peace after experiencing chaos. Imagine a man who spends years chasing relationships that are unpredictable. One day he feels loved, the next day he feels ignored. One moment he receives affection, the next he is questioning where he stands. The uncertainty creates emotional intensity, and he mistakes that intensity for love. Then he meets someone consistent. She communicates. She keeps her word. She does not manipulate him. She gives him clarity instead of confusion. At first, he may not understand what he has found. There is no emotional roller coaster, no constant guessing, no endless chasing, no dramatic proof of affection. And because he has not learned to appreciate stability, he may walk away searching for something that feels more exciting. Years later, he may understand that the excitement he was chasing was temporary, while the peace he rejected could have become a foundation for his life. This is why maturity changes your definition of attraction. When you are immature, you may ask, "How does this person make me feel?" As you grow, you begin asking, "Who does this person help me become?" That question changes everything. A valuable partner should not simply make your life more entertaining. They should contribute to the quality of your life. They should bring honesty, respect, emotional safety, encouragement, and stability. And you should be capable of offering those qualities in return. The Stoic lesson is to stop judging things only by their immediate appearance. Look at consequences. Look at patterns. Look at what remains when the excitement disappears. Beauty changes. Excitement fades. Attention fluctuates, but character becomes more valuable with time. Reason 5. He confuses ease with compatibility. There is another quiet reason some men walk away from a good woman. They confuse ease with compatibility and difficulty with passion. Somewhere along the way, many people absorb the idea that if a relationship requires effort, something must be wrong. But every relationship requires effort. The difference is what the effort is spent on. In a relationship built on chaos, the effort goes into surviving the relationship itself, decoding mixed signals, managing jealousy, repairing damage caused by broken trust, and constantly negotiating for basic respect. In a relationship with a good woman, the effort goes somewhere else entirely. It goes into building a life together, growing as individuals, raising a family with intention, or working through ordinary disagreements with maturity. A man who has only experienced the first kind of effort may mistake the second kind for a lack of connection. Because nothing is on fire, he assumes nothing is happening. But the absence of crisis is not the absence of depth. Two people quietly building trust over years are doing something far harder and far more valuable than two people who keep breaking up and getting back together. It simply doesn't look dramatic from the outside, and some men have been conditioned to believe that only drama proves love is real. Reason 6, he fears being truly known. There is a quieter, more vulnerable reason. Underneath many of these patterns, some men are afraid of being truly known. A good woman does not just want your attention. She wants to understand who you actually are. Your fears, your history, your insecurities, the parts of yourself you don't show anyone. That level of closeness can feel more frightening than any argument. It is far easier to keep a relationship at the surface. Compliments, physical attraction, and excitement can all exist without real vulnerability. But a woman who pays attention, who asks real questions, who notices when something is wrong before you say a word, is inviting a kind of intimacy that some men have never learned how to accept. If a man grew up believing that showing emotion is weakness or that needing someone is dangerous, then being deeply seen can feel like exposure rather than comfort. So instead of leaning into that closeness, some men retreat. They may accuse her of being too much or too intense, when what actually happened is that she got close enough to see him clearly, and he was not ready to be seen. This has nothing to do with her worth. It has everything to do with his own relationship with vulnerability, one that only he can choose to repair. Reason 7. He has not yet defined what he actually values. Finally, some men reject a good woman simply because they have never taken the time to define, honestly and specifically, what they actually value in a partner or in a life. Without that clarity, a person tends to default to whatever culture, social media, or peer pressure tells him to want: someone visually striking, someone who generates envy from friends, someone who fits a trend. None of those things are inherently wrong, but none of them are a foundation either. A man who has never asked himself hard questions: what kind of character do I want to build my life around? What actually makes me feel safe, respected, and at peace? What do I want my next 20 years to look like? Will struggle to recognize a good partner, even when she is standing directly in front of him. He is measuring her against a checklist he absorbed from the outside world, instead of one he built through self-reflection. This is perhaps the most fixable of all 7 reasons, because it does not require overcoming trauma or years of conditioning. It simply requires honesty. A man who sits down and genuinely asks himself what he values, rather than what he has been told to want, often finds that the qualities a good woman offers, loyalty, peace, honesty, stability, respect, are exactly what was on his list all along. He just hadn't written it down yet. The deeper question. So, after everything we have discussed, perhaps the real question is not why some men don't want a good woman. Perhaps the deeper question is a man mature enough to recognize what a good woman brings into his life? Because a good woman is not necessarily the woman who makes you feel the strongest emotions. She may be the woman who brings peace when your life is chaotic, honesty when you are confused, boundaries when you are careless, and stability when you are tempted to choose temporary excitement. And the same lesson applies to women as well. Never confuse someone's rejection with your lack of worth. Sometimes people reject what they are not ready to appreciate. Remember this. A person who is addicted to chaos may mistake peace for boredom. A person addicted to validation may mistake boundaries for rejection. And a person lacking maturity may mistake accountability for criticism. But time has a way of revealing value. What feels ordinary today may become precious tomorrow. What you ignore today may be what you desperately search for later. And what you once considered boring may eventually become the peace you wish you had protected. So don't chase people who constantly make you question your value. Don't destroy your standards just to keep someone's attention. And don't confuse being wanted with being respected. The goal is not simply to find a good woman or a good man. The goal is to become the kind of person who can recognize goodness, protect it, and return it. Because real love is not about finding someone who feeds your ego. It is about finding someone with whom you can build character, trust, peace, and a meaningful life. And if this message reached you at the right moment, remember one final thing. Sometimes losing someone isn't the greatest loss. Sometimes the greatest loss is failing to recognize their value while they were still standing beside you. Master yourself, protect your peace, and never sacrifice your character for temporary attention.